Hey, what's going on? This is Troy, and this is the Planet 76 podcast, your source for Sixers news, highlights, hot takes, and more. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, everyone, to Planet 76 podcast. I'm your co-host, Michael from Trust and Love. Troy with me, as always. Episode 42. Episode 42, we are getting ever so closer to 50. With that being said, make sure you guys subscribe to the podcast. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Go follow us on Instagram. And, yeah, James Harden has played.
That's right.
Officially for the Sixers. We're going to break it down for you in this episode. Again, episode 42. We are rolling. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, man. So, I think this is... I didn't even think about that. I know it's true, but I didn't think about it. This is our first episode with, being able to break down some James Harden action.
Yes.
And the good news and the great news is that the Sixers are 3-0 in those games, and so... a lot of good stuff to talk about. Still some question marks to answer and just some things to consider moving forward. And we're going to break that down on this episode. We're going to talk about some of the big men that have been just in and out for the Sixers, like literally even as late as today, even in the last couple hours, some changes to the front court. And so we're going to break that down. We're talking about just where the Sixers sit in the Eastern Conference standings and all of that fun stuff. So James Harden's debut was 6 days ago. We're recording on Thursday, March 3rd. James Harden played last Friday in Minnesota, a 31-point victory for the Sixers, 133-102. That is wild. Great game. And then played in New York 2 days later, a 16-point win. And then at home against New York, a 15-point win. So some pretty solid performances. I'm going to start with this, and then we can break it down a little further. So give me one word to describe this 3-0 week. It's James Harden in a Sixers jersey. It's all of that comes with that. What's one word to describe this week so far?
I would honestly say one word. I guess the first word that came to my mind was refreshing.
Ooh.
And I don't know how well I can explain that, but I think it could speak for itself in some sense. But for me, refreshing in the sense of James Harden is here, things look really good. It's refreshing to be able to win games like this and have a player like Harden who can do the things that he does, but have it be for your team, for the team that you root for. So I would say refreshing.
Okay,
yeah.
I think that's an excellent word choice. I was thinking surreal.
Yeah, it still is really.
It is. It's you're watching. We've seen 3 games worth now, 3 amazing performances from James Harden. Not to mention the rest of the team together, but it's so crazy to think where we've come as a fan base and where we've come as a team and where we've come so far along over the last number of years to this point that literally we say it every week now. James Harden is a 76er, and we got to watch some of that in action. So it's just surreal to me to even watch him on the court and be like, wow, that dude's wearing red, white, and blue, and he's on our team. But your word choice is pretty good too, man. That's good.
No, I think both word choices are fitting and accurate because both adjectives, they really describe, what's going on right now. Like, it's still something that, I was thinking about it earlier. Like, the Sixers haven't had a high-profile guy like this since Butler. Mm-hmm. And that was almost 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we're coming on the playoffs. It'll be 4 years in May. Or, technically it's only been 3, but
3,
you know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's just like, for as high of a profile guy as he was,
right. This is even more.
It's tenfold because of James Harden and who he is. So it's just like, wow. Right. It really is just
And then,
wow.
And then to your point, it's refreshing to see a guy like James Harden, a guy of this caliber, do what he does on the court. because the last time we've seen someone like that, I mean, we let's be honest, if we're getting down to like, the attention to great detail, there's no one in Sixers history that's done what James Harden does. A guy with the ability to score like he has. You think of Allen Iverson, of course. But James Harden he's just different. He's in a league of his own in terms of some of the things that he does. Not to say he's the best player ever, but he's just the things that he does, the way that he sees the court, his step back move. I mean, there's just so many things that make him unique, and so it's a very different thing and a very exciting thing. So now in those 3 games, obviously, pretty quickly we've seen a big 3 develop. Not pretty quickly, very quickly. So James Harden, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey. Let me read some numbers here, and then you tell me what you've seen, obviously, over these 3 games. So over these 3, Joel has averaged 32, 10 boards, 3 assists. He's attempted 51 shots. He's gotten to the free throw line 53 times across 3 games. James Harden averaging 27, 12, and 9. He's gotten to the free throw line 29 times. And then Tyrese Maxey is up near 25 points a game. 4 rebounds. He's shooting, obviously, a very, very small sample size, 3 games, but he's shooting 9 for 14 from 3, 27 for 42 overall. They are the first trio of teammates to each score 20-plus in their first 3 games together in NBA history. That's a pretty big deal. And then Joel Embiid, I saw a tweet today that says Joel Embiid is shooting 81% on passes that come directly from James Harden. Again, small sample size, but 81% is a remarkable number. And not to mention, especially the game against the Knicks that was at the Knicks, how much Joel got to the free throw line off of James Harden passes. So that's not even included in that number. So I guess in particular, what's your thoughts on this Big Three's performance? Did you expect it? Maybe something that caught you off guard? I don't know. Tell me about that.
Well, I think the one thing that really caught me off guard was how well things looked from the beginning. I don't know if I really thought that it would take off this quickly and translate this quickly. I had my hopes and I had my assumptions that things would look pretty smooth going forward, but not in such a quick way, and not in the first game that Harden suited up for the Sixers, and not especially 3 games in a row, and hopefully tomorrow night against the Cavs 4 games in a row. I mean,
right.
It's just remarkable. I mean, we know how great Maxey has been this season, but it's just fantastic. And again, I'll use the word refreshing to see how well he's playing alongside 2 bona fide MVP superstars. I mean, that's not something that I really would have expected, again, so quickly. Like, you would have thought, Maxey's still young. He's never really played with one guy like Embiid before. He's in his 2nd year, let alone 2 guys in James Harden and Joel Embiid. So it's like, this is something that it's just, I mean, you really just have to step back and appreciate it, because it's just fantastic. It's really, really great. It really is.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you. I think I expected it, maybe not quite as
to this extent.
Quickly. Yep, to the same extent. Yeah. And again, they set an NBA record for 3 teammates in how many points they scored across 3 games. For a trio to their first 3 games together. That's not a small feat. That's not a small deal. So it's been very cool to see what has happened. It's been cool to see even the interaction that Tyrese and James Harden have had. Of course, James Harden and Joel Embiid have had, and in post game and during the game, celebrating and just things that they do together. It's really cool to see Joel have a partner in crime like James Harden. So, and they've won games, and there's a tough schedule coming up over the next 4 games over the next week and a half, and we're going to talk about that toward the end of the episode. But there's some challenges, and they play 3 games in 4 nights coming up here soon. So there's going to be a lot of basketball played beginning tomorrow night, as you mentioned, at home against Cleveland. So certainly a lot to look forward to, and a lot to just keep your eye on moving forward there. So if you take a peek at the Eastern Conference standings, a lot of these teams were in action tonight. A lot of the games have gone final. So I think the Heat beat the Nets tonight.
Yeah.
Trae Young went off on somebody. I forget who. Who did they beat? They beat the Bulls. Yep.
Bulls.
So now the Sixers and the Chicago Bulls are both 2.5 back of Miami Heat, who are in first, followed by the Bucks and the Celtics and the Cavaliers, all within a game and a half of one another. The Cavaliers 5 back of first, the Bucks 3.5 back of first. So everybody chasing the Miami Heat, who are still playing well. They lost to the Bucks, I believe, last night, beat the Nets tonight. So when you see these Eastern Conference standings, what do you have any takes yet? Again, of course, everything is very subject to change again with how close these standings are, and there's over 20 games left. But what's your thoughts, at least right now at this point in the season, given the standings?
Well, I think it's going to come down to the wire. I would definitely like to see the Sixers maintain the seeding and general record they have right now. Well, not record, but you know what I mean in terms of winning percentage, things like that. I would love to see the Sixers stay where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, you would like them to move up, maybe get the 1 seed, possibly have a winner of the play-in kind of first round series, which would be nice. But the main thing is, I just would really like to see the Sixers finish the season strong. Whether they end 4, whether they end 3,
right?
Ideally 3, 2 to 3, I think is an ideal range for them. And I really think, I just would like to see them end the season strong. Obviously, first 3 games of Harden's debut have been a really solid outing, and I think, and I hope it's a good indicator of how the rest of the season's going to go. Again, especially with Maxey playing so well. I just, like, it really is going to come down to the wire, especially, not only with the Sixers, but every other team in the Eastern Conference. Because you have a team like the Nets, they're the 8th seed. I mean, I think they're only 4 games behind 4 seed, maybe 3 seed, something like that. I think, right?
They're like 5 games back of 5.
5 games.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So it really is going to come down to the wire. And about the Eastern Conference, I mean, the Raptors are I believe they're 6. No, they're 7 right now. Nets are 8. Hornets 9. Hawks 10. I mean, it's just.
But
wow.
then you also look at, so obviously 7 through 10 are in the play-in, and then right now, the Nets again are 8th, and they are only 2.5 games up on the 11 seed Washington Wizards, which is just it's nuts.
Wild.
And there's only a game of separation in the loss column between the two. So it's like the Nets are literally a game out in the loss column of being out. Think about that for a second.
Wow. The Wild Wild East this season.
It is.
Wow.
And I mean, it's gonna be interesting. Again, if subject to change. We could see the Nets move all the way up to 5 or something like that, but we could also see them have a rough go of it in the play-in tournament. And again, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But who knows? KD came back for them tonight, so that's hopefully gonna. Well, not hopefully. I don't really care. I don't hope they win, but maybe it'll help them moving on. So, Eastern Conference is gonna be crazy. Again, the Sixers really, although standings-wise, percentage-wise, they're 2.5 back of Miami, and tied with the Bulls. They're actually a game up in the loss column from the Bulls, and only a game behind in the loss column from the Heat. So, Heat have just played more games, and so. It's gonna be a good finish. It's gonna be a good finish. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, again, we can focus on the really, really good with James Harden, but I think we know that. But I've got a question.
Okay.
And it's about,
all right, I like questions.
It's about this backup big man fiasco we've got going on. And if you can see in the outline that I just kind of wrote a little question next to each one. They're not even necessarily for each one. I kind of just wrote some different questions. So we have a list of big men. Paul Millsap's new. Willie Cauley-Stein. Can you explain that situation to me? So he is gone. He was on a 10-day contract. He played like a minute and a half, and now he's gone.
He played literally 3 minutes. Like,
why?
I mean, I don't even really know. I really would have liked to see him get more burn. I think he's a solid player. I mean,
it's the point. It's the exact point of a 10-day contract. I don't.
right?
Not that I know of. I haven't seen a 10-day contract quite go like his did.
Yeah.
Where he had opportunities to play and they just didn't play him.
Yeah. I mean, it's
So Willie Cauley-Stein is gone. Then you got Paul Reed, you got Charles Bassey, and the newly acquired DeAndre Jordan. So, what is the answer? Is the question, and do you have an answer or what? And then I'm going to actually read a little article that I saw on this topic earlier today. But you can go ahead and take a stab at it. What's the answer? Who do you like? Who do you not like? Just give your thoughts on this fiasco that is the backup center position.
I like Charles Bassey a lot. I like Paul Reed. Paul Millsap, yeah. I think in certain situations, especially with Harden, he's been getting most of his run with Harden in the lineup. Him and Harden, whoever else. I don't think he's played much with Embiid, if at all.
Right.
I don't see the point of the DeAndre signing. I mean, I much rather would have liked the Sixers to keep Willie Cauley-Stein. I just think he's a bit more springier in a sense of he's a little more athletic. I know he's younger for a fact. I mean, DeAndre is kind of just. I think I don't want to use the term washed because I think that there aren't really many NBA players that are washed in a sense, but I just think he's kind of old. He doesn't really do much. I mean, he's slow. He isn't really a great scorer. I mean, if the Sixers brought him in for rebounding, then I guess it makes sense. He's still. I mean, he's not a threat to shoot at all, as most guys like him are nowadays. But he's a good shot blocker. I mean, I'm kind of grasping for straws here, but a lot of that comes with the fact that I would much rather see Reed or Bassey get some run with the actual roster as opposed to the third stringers.
See, while
I mean, like, what do you think about that? Where do you stand on that?
While I agree to a sense about Reed and Bassey getting burned, and I don't want to. I'm not like I'm treating the DeAndre Jordan signing like it was a James Harden thing, but I don't mind it.
Okay.
In fact, I kind of like it.
Okay.
Now, I also liked the Willie Cauley-Stein thing, and we saw him for 3 minutes, and now he's gone. So I agree with you. Like, I would have loved to see him get a chance. Like, what? It just didn't make any sense to me. And it never will, because we're never going to talk about him again. He was on the Sixers for 3 days. He didn't even fulfill a 10-day contract. 3 minutes later, he's gone. Literally. So that just didn't make sense. When I heard about DeAndre Jordan, the possibility that happening, I liked it. And some of the article I'm going to read here in a moment kind of addresses that. Addresses the good and the bad, the potentially ugly when it comes to having DeAndre Jordan. But I don't see like a great concern. Again, as you noted, I guess the Sixers brought him in to grab rebounds and maybe block shots, and he's a big body and that kind of thing. He's a veteran. And we're not asking him to do a role. The role that we're asking of whoever this backup center is going to be is unlike any other role that they've ever had in the NBA, especially a veteran like DeAndre Jordan, because he's backing up Joel Embiid. And that's, I think, kind of the thing when Andre Drummond was here that allowed him to have success, and Dwight Howard, what allowed him to have success is this, like, every other place they were either the starter or they were like getting significant minutes because there wasn't a center there that was very, very good. They're playing behind the potential MVP. And so the role is established, the role is known, and you just hope that, again, DeAndre Jordan's certainly going to get a look because he's on the team. We won a 10-day thing with him. So hopefully he can just fit the role and what he's asked to do. And so I actually read an article today that was a very good read. Liberty Ballers. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Harrison Grimm. No idea who that is, but I'm going to shout him out so I don't get in trouble. So here's what he said basically about this center situation, and I agree with it a lot. he said at the end of the article, he said, here's what I'm getting at. He said, I would argue that having no answer is worse than having a bad one in regard to the Sixers' backup big man situation. Having 3 to 4 question marks behind Embiid is a serious concern. In other words, the Sixers need to just pick one of these guys and go with it. So that's what he said. And then he said it's one thing if the Sixers play Reed or any of the bigs and it just doesn't work out. Then I think signing DeAndre Jordan or some other veteran center is very much justified. However, Reed has held his own defensively every time he's been on the court this season. The minutes have been inconsistent. They haven't been a nightmare. And that in and of itself is worth a look if you're trying to find a long-term answer behind Embiid. I agree with that. He said one of the biggest reasons for Reed not being on the court was the Sixers had to space the floor for Simmons, who is now long gone. Reed's offense is still very raw, but he's more than capable of setting screens and catching lobs. Again, he gets to this. It looks like the Sixers are going to sign DeAndre Jordan. They, in fact, did, making him the 5th center on the team. Now back to 4 because Willie Cauley-Stein is out of here. He said, even though I'm not high on him, DeAndre Jordan, I hope I'm wrong. Harden has a history of elevating his teammates, and that could be the case with Jordan. He's also had his best years under Doc Rivers, albeit several years ago. Dwight Howard and Andre Drummond signings initially raised some question marks, and those turned out okay. They're all fair points. Jordan will likely only average 10 or 15 minutes at most in the postseason, with all of those minutes likely being next to James Harden. If Jordan plays passable defense, sets screens, and catches a lob or two, it won't be a big deal. However, this is where the bad comes in. This is the end. If the Sixers get the DeAndre Jordan that has been labeled negatively by NBA fans and analysts for the past few years, things could get ugly fast. If that happens, the Sixers won't have an answer in their most crucial moments because they've simply chosen not to find one. Again, that gets back to the emphasis he made initially, saying, okay, now look at us. We're 20 games out from the playoffs. We have the best center in the world, and we don't know who's going to back him up. We got Paul Millsap, we got Paul Reed, we got Charles Bassey, and now we have DeAndre Jordan. He's saying what's better than having a question mark is just pick somebody and let's roll. What's your thoughts on any of that? I know that's a lot.
No, I to an extent I agree, especially to the point where they have options. The Sixers have options. I mean, I think it all comes down. Yeah, I just pick one. I mean, there's 4 guys they can run at this spot. I mean, again, like the article kind of said, it's kind of a luxury, but also it might not be. And to the point about Paul Reed, I mean, he's shown some really nice flashes, especially as an athlete. I mean, he's stringy, he's athletic, he's long, he can defend a little bit. And I think I think in terms of the fit with Harden, I think he's the best of the 4. Just athleticism-wise, I mean, screening, getting to the rim, flying to the rim off of screens and rolling to the rim and catching lobs. I mean, he's insanely athletic. And I think he's shown a small amount of potential in areas of stretching the floor, 3-point shooting. His jumper is, it's kind of but it's I think Paul Reed is my pick is basically what I'm saying. I think he and even though he is a bit undersized, he's not as big in terms of width as a guy like Bassey or DeAndre. But I think in terms of length and versatility, I think he's the best option. And also I think he is a great fit alongside even Maxey. I mean, screener roles with Maxey and Reed would be great, as well as Harden and Reed. I mean, I think he's what is he, like 6? I guess he's kind of undersized, but like I said, I think the fit would be very solid.
And we've seen Paul Reed, and of the guys we've seen, he's probably the most encouraging on this list. Again, we haven't seen DeAndre Jordan in the Sixers uniform, and again, this is an entirely new role for him. It just is. Now, I looked at how many games he started over the last couple of years. It wasn't quite half, but he did start occasionally. and he was like the guy and getting the minutes. But guess what? That's absolutely out of the picture now. And so that could change something for him in him. And I think I agree with the article to pretty much everywhere, but to an extent in the sense that I think it's okay to be somewhat situational. But obviously in the playoffs, you're not going to be situational. Who's going to go out there across 4 guys? You're just not. So I think you got to get it to 2, in my opinion. I like what you said about Paul Millsap. I think he's the most plug-and-play situation guy that there is of those 4. I think he can absolutely hurt us if it's the wrong situation more than the other guys.
Especially defensively.
Absolutely. So I think, if I said, okay, let's get these 2 guys the most minutes, toward the end of the regular season, it would be Paul Reed and DeAndre Jordan.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. I agree. And simply because, although I think Reed and DJ might be the best 2 defensively, and from a backup big, that's probably what you want, especially considering how great Joel is defensively in the paint and as a rim protector, shot blocker, all that stuff. I think having a guy like, again, I will say to his credit, DeAndre he's a good shot blocker. He's been a good shot blocker throughout his career. He's still, again, like you said, he's a big body. You don't have to be the most athletic to be a good shot blocker. It helps, but again, he's been able to sustain that for his career. Again, not as large of an extent as it was in Los Angeles on the Clippers.
Right.
I mean, even with the Mavericks for that low point.
Yeah, and he's only 33. And I say that because Millsap is 37, I think. But I mean, DeAndre Jordan is a year older than James Harden. That means when we're talking about getting ready for the playoffs next year, James Harden will be the exact same age as DeAndre Jordan is now. Just saying. So
right.
Why not? Give him a shot. And again, I think it all comes back to this role, and I think Paul Reed gives us the most wow factor. He can versatility, and he can really if he gets the minutes, he can make an impact on a game in a big way. DeAndre Jordan is just going to be a sustain until Joel gets rest and gets back in, versus Paul Reed possibly having significant time. That's my thoughts there. So backup big man is going to be an interesting thing to monitor coming down the stretch. And then let's talk about our boy, Tobias Harris. Tell me about Tobias Harris since the James Harden deal.
So Harris since the Harden deal, to put it simply, has not been as great, and also hasn't been as good as he was prior to the deal. In fact, I would say the month before the deal was probably his best month and a half-ish this season. And the good thing is, though, he had a good game last night against the Knicks. I think he ended with 15 on 8 shots, I think. A couple rebounds, some pretty good defense on Randall. The good thing is he's getting shots. He's getting open looks. And again, we talk about the Harden effect. This is what happens when Harden's on the court. Even when he doesn't necessarily have the ball, guys are shadowing him. Guys are waiting to help on Harden if he gets the ball. They're anticipating that, and they're not anticipating Harris being wide open, which again, even if Harden doesn't have the ball, there's opportunities where Harris gets open, and he's getting open shots. Now, he's not making all of them, but the good thing is he's getting them, and I think they'll start to fall. I think they'll eventually start to fall, and I think he's still going to be that scoring guy that we know he is. I mean, he's still averaging 18 on the season. I think he can average somewhat close to there for the rest of the season. So I think it's gonna be fine with Harris.
Yeah, after that first game against Minnesota, he went 2 for 9. He had 6 points. And then at New York, he went 3 for 9. He had 12, and I believe at least 2 of those buckets were late in the fourth when it was kind of put away.
Yeah, they were kind of clutch, yeah.
And then, 14 last night against New York at home. The thing, I mean, again, we knew James Harden coming in, points per games are going to go lower because it's just math. Because James Harden comes in, he's going to put up 25, 26 a game, and Seth Curry is only going out, 13 points a game. So, therefore, mathematically, 13 points got to come off from somewhere. Or so, something like that. And so, the one thing, Tobias, you mentioned Tobias is getting good looks. He's getting open looks. He's getting more spot-up looks than he has in his Sixers tenure, prior. I think he had, I always am reminded of how well he was shooting from 3 when he was on the Clippers the year we got him. He was shooting 40% from 3 that year. And he's getting looks, and he's also passing up open looks lately. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's rooted in. Obviously, I think the Tobias Harris is he's getting the ball less, and he's getting the ball less like with a need for him to dribble, if that makes sense. So, like, prior to the trade, we would often see Tobias have the ball in his hands and make a play for himself. That's not really fitting into this offense, at least over 3 games, no? Am I wrong?
I think a lot of times Harris... Now, I will say, I still think he excels as a catch-and-shoot player, especially from 3. But a lot of times, if let's say he's on an ISO at the top of the key or on the wing, a lot of times he needs like 1 or 2 dribbles to get a shot or get going. It's when he gets into the 3, to the 4, to the 5 dribbles, when things kind of go south, and to like what you were saying, I think it's kind of just about his rhythm. And I don't know if he's necessarily getting that, but like I said, I think he will. I think he will adapt, and I think he will begin to get that again.
I think he and Tyrese were the 2 guys we mentioned with their, hopefully being able to play very well and improve off of playing with James Harden.
Yeah.
Now, Maxey's in a different role, and it's in a more comfortable role for him. He brings the ball up sometimes, but James Harden's kind of running the show, and Tyrese can just fly down the court, and he's been awesome. He's averaging almost 25 a game. Tyrese Maxey, like, that's awesome. Yeah. And then you look at Tobias Harris, whose role is different now, and he hasn't excelled yet. He just hasn't, and we're gonna see it. I know we will. I personally just. Again, as you mentioned, Tobias is not only an 18 point per game scorer this year, but for his career, like 16, 17, 18, the dude knows how to score the basketball. Yeah. And he knows how to do it in a variety of different ways. Some better than others, yes, but he's too good of a scorer to just not find a role in this offense. And I think I was thinking about this today, Tobias has bounced around from team to team, from offense to offense, from scheme to scheme. Even within the Sixers offense, I mean, my goodness, he's went from the second option to the third option to the fourth option to the third option to the fourth option, and back and forth. He's played in so many different schemes and roles that this isn't like earth-shattering adjustments, and I think he's pretty good at adjusting. He's adjusted from all these different systems that he's been in and been able to do what he does. So I think it might just take a little time. I would, as you mentioned, love to see him catch the ball, shoot the ball, because there's opportunities for him to do that. If Tobias can take notes from anyone on this team, I think it's George Niang.
Yeah, spot up. I mean, if you haven't liked George Niang before this, I don't know how you don't like him now. I mean, this dude just lets it fly, but he has the resume to back it up because he is a really good shooter on pretty decent volume. Like, he takes a lot of threes, but he also makes a decent amount. And I think it was the Bucks game before the All-Star break.
Yeah.
He took 10 threes. and he made 5. That's 50% on. Now that's I mean, Trae Young is taking 10 a game. I mean, Steph Curry takes like 12 a game, but those are some pretty high volume 3-point numbers. And for a guy like Niang,
as long as you're knocking him down,
I think it really speaks to the player he is. Because I mean, we've seen it this season.
Right.
This dude's a baller. I mean, he's a great shooter, a solid scorer for him being kind of slow-footed, but he's just take notes, Tobias, from George Niang, because really he's very good at what he does, and I catch and shoot. That's another player on this team that really excels in the catch and shoot.
And we all
role.
we all believe that Tobias Harris can score the basketball, and we all believe that he can shoot the basketball. Now there's going to be moments. Again, I'm more comfortable with him dribbling around the basket, low post, on a smaller defender. His turnaround jumper is pretty nice. Even his face-up game around the basket is pretty good too. But with that being said, the fact of the matter is James Harden is on this team, therefore you're dribbling the ball less.
You just have to. It just makes the most sense. And like I said, I know he needs a few dribbles to get into his rhythm, but it's just I know for a fact that he had a ton of opportunities at a catch and shoot 3. He made quite a few of them on Sunday against the Knicks, yesterday against the Knicks, against the Timberwolves. Catch and shoot, float, get the ball, shoot it on the perimeter, get the ball and shoot it. Even if it's a step through, even if like catch, take a step, shoot it, or if it's on the fast break in transition, kind of like step into the 3, get the ball and step and shoot. Like that's really where he is best. And like you mentioned with the Clippers, I mean he was shooting 40% from 3. I believe he almost shot 40 last year.
Right.
This is what he does.
Yeah, it's even funny because we mentioned that weeks ago when James Harden wasn't a Sixer yet. Tobias shoot more threes, and now it's the golden opportunity to do so alongside James Harden. So hopefully we see that. Also, of course, worth noting, so Tobias, I looked this season around 13 field goal attempts a game. This week around 9 a game, so down. But again, he's passing up shots. He's had open looks. He's missed open looks. They're going to fall, and I'm confident they're going to fall. So, but let me ask you this, in the grand scheme of things, because the NBA, Instagram, Twitter, everyone has taken on this thing of the Sixers' big 3. That does not include Tobias Harris. It's clear over these 3 games, at least on that level of social media, it doesn't include Tobias Harris. Now, how important is Tobias, grand scheme, big picture, how important is his scoring to this team? Him being around 9 points a game, 10 points a game, versus him being up around his season average. How much does that play a factor into how good this team can possibly be?
I think it's very important. I think his scoring ability is going to play a huge role in where the Sixers end up, not only before the playoffs, but during the playoffs. I think him being a 13, 14, 15 point per game scorer only elevates them as a team, only raises their ceiling. And because if he can really step into that role and kind of mold into that player once again, it just adds so much versatility to the Sixers offense and how they can play. Because we know we can depend on Tobias for 14 a game on 4 threes. That's 4 for 8 from 3, 4 for 9 from 3, whatever. Having another player to depend on like that is something that not a lot of teams have. And when you have that, it kind of, at least offensively, again, like I said, separates you from a lot of other teams, and it just makes you look more dangerous as a team having something like that, and an extra element.
Yeah, I agree. He's important. Long term, big picture, playoff picture, he is important. So he needs to figure it out. And again, the panic button is certainly nowhere near this table on Planet 76.
No.
Other people are over exaggerating on Tobias, and they have all year. Let's be honest. But coming into this trade, Tobias was playing very well. Let's also be honest there. And he's going to figure it out. And I just to emphasize it again, I think his ability and willingness to adapt to every culture he's been in, every team he's been on, is only going to help him here as he figures it out with the new look Sixers. So 3 games in 4 days coming up for the Sixers against some playoff teams, Eastern Conference battles. So Cleveland tomorrow night at home, back-to-back in Miami on Saturday, a day off, and then Chicago right here at the Wells Fargo Center on Monday, and then the big one a week from tonight, the 4th game, Brooklyn at home on Thursday. I saw you selling some tickets on your Instagram this week on Trust the Love.
Yes. They actually got sold, thankfully. That's going to be a fantastic game. Whether or not you know who plays, it's going to be fantastic. And this next week of basketball for the Sixers is going to be pretty telling, I would say, in terms of how this new look team stacks up against the rest of the conference. And I'm also just really looking forward to the playoffs now that Harden is here. I really would like to I want to see how this team translates to playoff basketball, because I know it will translate well, but how well is the question. So I think this next stretch, again, Cavs, Heat, Nets, these are all top 5 teams. I mean, okay, the Nets are 8. we know the Nets are good, so we know the Nets are good. I think this is going to be a really telling stretch of basketball, and it's going to kind of have the Sixers thrown in, like, okay, we're in the final, 12 game, 15 game stretch of the season. Let's do this. Let's lock in. We have Harden.
Right.
We have our full team for once. Let's do this.
I agree. It's going to be telling. Again, Cleveland, Miami, Chicago, and Brooklyn across the next 7 days. So let's get ready. Let's do this thing. And, also say, I think that, to your point, you just reminded me of something. We have everybody. This team is healthy. I mean, who's missing right now? No one, I don't think, that's out. I don't know another NBA team that can say that. There's big names that are out around the NBA right now. And the Sixers, knock on wood, are in good shape right now. So that's a very good thing. And, I'm excited. I don't know if we're going to win all 4 of those, but, who knows? As tough as it is to admit, I don't think the Sixers are going to go undefeated with James Harden in his career, but we shall see. So Cleveland, Miami, Chicago, Brooklyn coming up, and we'll be here to talk about and recap that on our next episode of Planet 76. We'll see you next time. You just listened to an episode of the Planet 76 podcast. Hey, we appreciate you joining us for this episode. Whatever platform you're on, why don't you hit that subscribe button for us, and we'll see you next time.